SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the global industry coverage under one roof. Expect an industry-leading conference agenda covering all verticals across 7 stages, a huge trade show floor filled with over 3,000 exhibitors, and luxury networking events at premium venues in one of Europe's coolest cities. Join 10,000 executives this September at the event drawing the industry's eyes. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
Greetings from the Canadian Gaming Summit. We are here in Toronto, day 0, I guess, because it's the Player Protection Symposium. I'm Jessica Wellman, editor of Canadian Gaming Business. I'm going to lead with today instead of SBC Americas, joined by a fellow editor-in-chief, though, a more important editor than I am, Steve McAllister of Gaming News Canada. Steve, thank you for coming on the pod.
My pleasure, Jessica. And it's only editor-in-chief and name only, and it's one of the benefits that comes from being a partner in Parlay Media Group.
Now, I know we all know you from Parlay Media Group. I would love to hear, before we talk about the conference, how did you end up here? Because nobody gets into gambling media on purpose.
Well, it could be a long story, Jessica, because I've been in the journalism business for the better part of 41 years now. But just quickly, I mean, I've spent most of my life working in newspapers. I was a sports writer with the Canadian Press, which is the Canadian equivalent of Associated Press. Was sports editor of the Globe Mail, Canada's national newspaper. I ran Yahoo's Canadian sports property for 7 years. And then I pretty much in 2018 decided I was getting out of journalism and looking towards retirement. And I took a 2-year contract as a corporate affairs person with a nuclear plant on Lake Huron in the northwestern part of Ontario, where I live now with my wife. And 2.5 years ago, Mark Silver, the founder and CEO of Parlay Media Group, he called me out of the blue. Mark and I knew each other from our media days and said, hey, there's something going on with sports betting in this country. I think there's a business here for us. I don't know what that business is, but are you interested? And I said, sure, I'll put retirement on hold. And Mark said, why don't we start? You're a journalist. Let's try to get some credibility in the industry and start by writing a newsletter. And I don't know if you remember, but in those early days, I didn't know a parlay from a prop. And the newsletter was like maybe 250 words of gaming news. And then I would go on and on about National Reconciliation Day in Canada, or write about women in sports, sociologically. And where we are today, and again, thanks to people like yourself and the other journalists at SBC and journalists not just in Canada but in the U.S. and across the other parts of the world, we produce a newsletter where I'm writing about 6,000 words a week. I host a podcast that you've appeared on, and it's kind of been a second life for me as a journalist.
Now, you have really made that transition a lot easier than other people have. I think a lot of people, I know in the U.S., you look around, so many of them are just sports people that see the betting opportunity and they just try to jump right in. What was the learning curve like for you to get to know and become kind of conversant in regulatory advertising mandates and things like that?
Yeah, it really helped me. When I left Canadian Press in '93, I went and joined the Canadian Tennis Federation, and I was there for about 10 months, and the National Hockey League Players Association was about to go through a labor stoppage in 1993. Bob Goodnow, who was the executive director at the time, called me and said they needed a media relations person. I thought he was looking for free tennis tickets. And going through the collective bargaining process and working for Bob, I had to learn the business side of sports. And as a sports writer in the 80s and 90s, I could care less about salary arbitration and franchise values and the mundane numbers and financials that come with sports teams. And working for Bob and for the Players Association, I had to learn the business side. And I think that eventually led me to getting the job at the Globe and Mail. And that's why I think the transition might have not been so difficult for me, because I had that sports business background and I was curious and was willing to ask questions and try to learn the industry. And to be honest, I think sometimes coming to something new instead of being, thinking you're an expert on something, you being a good journalist yourself, it's about asking questions and being curious and talking to people. And as I've said to you on several occasions, this industry is full of really good people, communications people who do a great job. There's access to leaders across this industry, and so I think that's really helped me as well.
Were you at CGS last year?
Yes, yeah. Last year was my first CGS. My first conference was the SBC Summit in Secaucus in December 2021, when I was forced into pitching for Parlay Media Group at the
first pitch. That's
first pitch
right.
competition.
First pitch winner.
Yes, because Mark Silver had contracted COVID right before both of us were supposed to go, so I pinch hit for Mark, and that was my first exposure to being at one of those conferences.
So I feel like literally my first day at SBC was the first day of CGS last year, so a year and a week ago. And I came in and it was just so palpable how much people were excited about Ontario and Ontario iGaming. Coming into this year's conference, do you think obviously that's still a big part of it, but are people starting to think about other things and be a little broader in what they're expecting and what they want to talk about?
Yeah, I think it feels to me like there's some real momentum right now with regards to iGaming beyond Ontario and what's the next step is for regulation in this country. And for me personally, that was really the wheel started turning for me, being at the iGaming X conference and back in March in New York, and then being at the SBC Summit North America last month, and hearing those panel discussions and the frustrations with operators and suppliers not being able to get iGaming regulated. The U.S. has been a little bit of a different ball of wax, where states have legalized sports betting, but they haven't legalized the online gaming piece. Where in Canada and Ontario, and in hindsight, it looks like that was the right way to go. They kind of got the whole enchilada at once. And so I think, there's two things. I think this week is a celebration of the industry in Ontario and what's happened. I think people are excited about getting together. It was a little bit different a year ago because the market was less than 2 months old. But I also think there's a real look right now from a lot of stakeholders in the industry wondering if it's not the Ontario model that you're taking to other provinces, what is the model and how long is it going to take before we see a regulated sports betting and iGaming framework in British Columbia, in Alberta, and in Quebec?
I mean, they have it a little bit, right, with like Play Alberta, Play BCLC. I'm curious. I always say the reason online casino doesn't come as quickly in the U.S. is that it's a much easier sell to lawmakers that everybody places sports bets. Everybody has these handshake bets. It's a little tougher of a sell to be like, we all play blackjack on our telephone. It feels still a little more, off limits and a little more inappropriate, to be kind of puritanical about it. What's the attitude like here? Because you've had the provincial lotteries around for so long, is it just a little more accepted that this is just something that people can do?
Yeah, no, you make a great point, Jessica. It's a case where, because the lottery corporations have been around for so long, and because there has been a gray market here, Canadians are used to betting on sports and playing online blackjack and other online casino games. And the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, one thing they did do leading up to the opening of the Ontario marketplace was having an open and honest conversation with operators. And the operators that wanted to come into Ontario made it clean that they wanted both sports betting and iGaming to be pieces of that puzzle right from day one. And the success that we've seen in Ontario, I think, is reflective of the fact that certainly the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation knew, and the operators who come in have seen now that there are customers. There's a rabid base of people who like to play online games, and they also like to bet on sports.
Well, we've also seen too that they're willing to, these operators, go into the regulated side of things and come out of the gray. Although, whether that extends to the rest of Canada, I don't know. You guys broke this story last week, I guess. Sorry, it's been a blur with all this travel. I'm like, what day is it? What is going on with the two coalitions?
Yeah, the last 3 or 4 weeks we've seen essentially what's a bun fight between coalitions. And a couple of weeks ago I wrote about some of the operators in Ontario have created an online gaming coalition with an eye on getting regulated in Quebec. And of course, that was met with big pushback from Lotto Quebec, which wants to continue operating a monopoly in essence. And then last week it came out that there were four lottery corporations across the country who are kind of want to wage their own war against licensed operators whose commercials. I mean, it's an interesting media landscape here, Jessica, where if you're watching Hockey Night in Canada, which is kind of our showcase property, like Sunday Night Football. A Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, even though the Ontario operators are advertising, those advertisements are seen across the country. So the 4 provincial lottery corporations, they filed a cease and desist notice to a bunch of the Ontario operators. The Ontario operators, they put together their own coalition. They sent a letter back to the lottery corporation, and they're asking if the attorneys general for the provinces were consulted on this action, and they're contending that this coalition has hired a public relations firm, so they want to know how much money it costs to pay a PR company to tell that coalition story. So I think we're gonna see more of that. Although it's funny because what we've seen and what we've heard in Ontario is the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, they come out and they said the competition, the regulated marketplace has been good for them. It kind of gave them a kick in the butt, made them up their game, especially on the digital side. And there's a pretty rosy financial picture with the Provincial Lottery Corporation over the past 12 months that goes in concert with having 45 operators in Ontario.
Well, and OLG remains the biggest operator, right? We don't have numbers, but we've heard that they're still doing just fine.
Yeah, you hear, obviously Bet365, because they had a bit of a, clubhouse lead by being a gray market operator, that Bet365 has done quite well. There's a belief that FanDuel and BetMGM have come in the market fairly strong, but you're absolutely right. I think OLG, OLG was, I think, a half $500 million in revenue last year, and the anticipation when they release their annual report is that those numbers are going to be there's going to be a substantial increase.
So to go back to this coalition thing, because I'm still trying to understand it completely, is it more for the operators like a Bet365 who still have rest of world operations turned on to Canada and operate in Ontario, compared to, say, BetMGM, who is like, we're only in Ontario, and if you see our commercials, it doesn't matter if you're in Saskatchewan because you can't get on and bet with us anyways?
It is, we have seen there has been the provincial lottery corporations, they have been requesting the provincial and federal governments in Canada for a while now to take a stand against gray market operators. But as you know, it's really hard.
In the U.S., we've been trying to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to police, and obviously I follow the American Gaming Association's efforts and lobbying to try to get politicians in your country to do that, and it's a tall mountain to climb. I think it's been made even a bit more difficult by the fact that, again, it's really hard to geographically erase advertising. So if you're watching a Blue Jays game and the score bet has signage around the Rogers Centre, whether you're living in Toronto or you're living in Vancouver, if you're watching a Blue Jays game, you're going to see that branding.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., FanDuel and DraftKings have said, we're at the point now where it just makes more sense financially to advertise, but, being in Kentucky, there's no way I can get to it. I have to drive to Ohio, I have to drive to Indiana. It's a little bit of a different beast here.
Yeah, and it feels the same way. You wrote about this a few weeks ago, and I think we had you on our podcast to talk about the BetMGM sign at Fenway Park on the Green Monster.
Oh yeah.
And the kind of the kerfuffle over that. And to me, it's the same thing again. Like I can sit and watch a Nesson broadcast of a Red Sox game, and I'm going to see that Bet365 sign on the Green Monster all night. Doesn't mean I can go in and place a bet on BetMGM in Massachusetts, because it's not going to allow me to do that. And I just don't know how you escape. That's a real tall ask for media companies and for operators to geo target their advertising and marketing.
The logo slap, it's it's tough to regulate something like that. And I think what I'm really curious to see from Ontario with all of the marketing, like asking for input, is if operators here are kind of saying what people in the United States are saying, which is, I get that it maybe doesn't feel great and it doesn't seem good that this stuff's all over the place, but we actually have no proof that this, that like little Jimmy at 7 is going to suddenly grow up to be an MGM sports bettor in the making. We don't really know. All we have is just kind of this icky feeling about it.
And that's something we're hearing when we do our LinkedIn audio shows on Thursday afternoons, and the conversations I have with people for the newsletter is that they want to see that research, and again, they would look at that research with an open mind, and if it turns out that yes, that advertising is having an impact on your little Jimmy, that's going to force the whole industry to make some changes, and they seem to be willing to do that. There are a couple of other factors that are at play here too, Jessica, and that's one, that you have a wide open market, arguably the most wide open market on the planet, with again 45 operators. And you also we live in a world that is just 1 year removed from a pandemic, and media companies want advertising dollars. They're not going to turn down those advertising dollars. So I think it's been a perfect storm, and I think you and I have discussed this on LinkedIn Audio, is that there is going to be a point where both in the U.S. and Canada, where these operators are going to have to start pulling back on marketing and advertising spend. And if I had $1 for every time I heard the word profitability at a gaming conference this year, you and I could fly to Hawaii. We could fly to Hawaii right after this podcast.
It's true. I mean, it is kind of that natural inflection point in the cycle where, I mean, I realize we're in Canada, I keep bringing up American things, but you look at Ohio and how you went from that first month where we were all freaking out. I think I did come on your LinkedIn audio show for this one to talk about $1 billion and like $300 million in promos. And then, by April, we're already down to like $30 million a month in promos. That I haven't seen that kind of steep fall off in other markets in past years.
Yeah. And I wonder too, social media, and I find a lot of the backlash I see on social media is kind of from old geezer sports journalists like myself, and nobody likes change. It's kind of like when I worked in the newspaper business and you did a redesign. People hated the redesign, and this is a new industry. People have to get the word out. The fact that you are competing with operators who were in the previous gray market. Operators have to get their brand out, but there is a point where you can't keep throwing money at advertising marketing. You got to be a little bit more smart about it, be a little bit more creative, and I think, as you mentioned, that happened in Ohio. We're going to get there in Ontario at some point.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little plug for SBC Americas and Canadian Gaming Business. Aaron Gallagher, who I think is around here somewhere, did a great interview with Ipsos about exactly what your money can get you in the market in terms of brand awareness. So be sure to head on over and check that out. Before I let you go, what are you really looking forward to this week with the conference, besides seeing if these coalitions, have a fight in the hallway or something?
Yeah, I'm quite more than willing to promote SBC here, and to me it's the networking. And these conferences have really helped me open the door to relationships. I met Chris Grove in 2021 in Secaucus. And, Chris not only became an investor in Parlay Media Group, but he's been a great resource just to get a comment on for a story, or just to bounce an idea off of. Benji Cherniak was one of our early investors, and Benji was one of the guys, patted me on the back when we won the first pitch competition in 2021. And I think the chance to meet people, when I see yourself, and I see Matt Rybaltowski from Sports Handle, and Jeff Sakotny from Covers, and Dave Briggs from Play Canada, and Robin McNeil, and you have a chance to just catch up with the journalists at these events. I think that's that's important. And so I really, the panels tend to be a little bit of the same. Like what we're going to hear this week, there'll be some of the same messaging we heard 4 or 5 weeks ago in Secaucus. But to me, it's the networking and running into old faces and meeting new ones.
Will you we have our first Canadian First Pitch.
Yes, absolutely. And I am moderating 2 panels on Wednesday. And then we're gonna do our LinkedIn audio live from the convention center floor on Thursday. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, you set me up perfectly. For people who want to follow you, I know the answer, but you tell them, where can they find you guys?
Yeah, you can find us on Substack. It's Gaming News Canada. You subscribe to the newsletter. Follow me on LinkedIn. If you follow my LinkedIn page, I promote the LinkedIn audio show we do it every Thursday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Great panel of guests. You've been on, I think, 3 or 4 times with us now. Sue Schneider's been on a couple of times. We had Christian Robolino was with us last week. And then we take that LinkedIn audio, we record it, and we turn it into a podcast that goes out every Friday. But the easiest way to find Gaming News Canada is through Substack.
Yeah, and that podcast is, if I'm not on there live, know that I am listening at another point in time, because I truly don't think there's a better group of Canadian voices having conversations, and you are a great leader of that. So keep it up, although don't give up on our podcast. We do good things too. It's just not Canadian focused. So be sure to check out Steve's podcast and keep tuning in to iGaming Daily at SBC.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.